It's Women's History Month, and what better way to celebrate than to interview our 19th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Joanne Bess. I'm Master Sergeant Ariel DeHogas.
I'm Tech Sergeant Maria David.
And we're filling in for the Air Force Aid Society CEO, Kay Wright, for a special podcast for Women's History Month.
We have the honor of introducing to you the 19th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Joanne S. Bass, the first woman and Asian American to serve in this role. So thank you, Chief Bass, for joining us today. We know you're busy, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule for us.
I'm excited to be here with you guys, Ariel, Maria. It's an honor, and honestly, it was also a no-brainer. How I realize how much our AFAS does for airmen and families, and there's no way I could pass up an opportunity to, I guess, give back some time and give back my gratitude for everything that they do for all of us.
So in honor of Women's History Month, we thought it would be great to feature you and to really thank you for your service, your inspiration that you've provided us, all of the service women here across the United States. You truly are a trailblazer, and we thank you for that, the legacy that you've provided, and basically just the opportunity to say, okay, I can do that too, right?
You can.
So in today's format, we plan to ask you a few questions, right, to learn more about you, your Air Force career, and how you basically balance it all. How you are, the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, but you're also a wife and a mother. And for myself and I know Sergeant David, those are really sometimes difficult to kind of keep in balance, and we kind of love to hear about that from you.
I am excited to share anything that I can. I recently heard General Van Ovos talk a little bit about some challenges and opportunities that she's had being a trailblazer herself. And I love what she said last week. I remember her saying, you can't be what you can't see. And so I'm so excited that, Ariel, that I can be somebody that people can see and then be better than me.
I can't tell you how excited I am right now, because I've never thought that there'd be someone that looked like me sitting up here being the highest enlisted person in the Air Force. And it's almost like my dreams are coming true, even though I'm not the one sitting in the seat. So we're gonna go ahead and jump straight into this chat. And I'll start off with asking how you did land in this role that I think is a dream job.
I love that you think this is a dream job. and it is. Here's what's interesting. And can we just dialogue and have fun?
Mm-hmm.
And can I go anywhere with it? All right. When I was a senior airman, I remember somewhere in ALS telling everybody that, man, I want to be the next female Chief Master in the Air Force. Like, as a young E4, I remember saying that. And then life happens. And then you become a non-commissioned officer, and you're married, and you have a family, and oh, by the way, you have subordinates, and like life is busy. And then the last thing ever on my mind was being a Chief Master Sergeant, let alone the Chief Master in the Air Force. And Ariel, you can appreciate when I made Master Sergeant, I was like, yes, I can retire, right? Because life happened. Yeah. And then I remember, 5 years ago, my first assignment in the Pentagon, and I was there when Chief Master in the Air Force number 17 was there, and also number 18. And I remember at that time, this was just 5 years ago, thinking, there is no way I'd ever want to be the Chief Master in the Air Force, only not because it's not a dream job, but I saw firsthand just how much responsibility was on their plate. And I was like, that's a lot, So anyway, it's very ironic. It's ironic for me to think that 5 years ago. It's humbling. It's an honor. And it was very much a family decision to continue to have the great opportunity to serve. And so now back to your question on how did I land this? I don't know that that's how it went down, more than our Air Force has a way of developing leaders across the force and developing them to continue serving at different levels of organization for the good of the enterprise. And I have been so very fortunate in my career at the squadron level, group level, wing command level, to have amazing teammates, amazing bosses, amazing subordinates to help grow me to be that leader at every level. And really, that's what it was. And then if I look back at even my boss a year ago, who very much is a person who develops those around her. And she was very serious about, let me continue to even develop Chief Bass for better things. And she's also somebody who believes in, let me play my freshman and let Chief Bass do the things that she needs to do. I think that we all get developed for certain things like this. And so when the time came around where Chief Master in the Air Force number 18 was going to retire, the next question is then who is on the bench to potentially take his place? And that's when, you know, folks start looking at all of the talent amongst the Chief Corps and let us figure out who that needs to be. And then you start, your records start to get looked at by lots of different bodies, and the rest is history.
Wow. So I appreciate that someone even at the chief level is like, let me groom her a little bit. Let me see what I can do here, because I see that you could probably be the next Chief Master in the Air Force. Yeah. So then when it comes to the chief process and they start looking at your records, right? I guess, do you become, what is the process to actually be selected though? Do you get put in a pool with other chiefs across the Air Force? How does that work?
Yeah, so again, your records will get looked at, and then, and depending on who the hiring authority is, in this case, you know, what did General Brown want? What were some of the key attributes that he was looking for the next Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force? And they just started to dwindle that down. There are quite a few interviews in that process. My spouse got interviewed as well, which was fun. You know, as y'all mentioned, you know, we're dual military, Army husband, you know, so he got interviewed on, you know, how will he be able to support his spouse serving in this position? And then it culminated in a final interview with General Brown, so he could ultimately make that decision. But Ariel, one thing that I want to mention that, you know, it's true, hearing you say that, you know, man, even at this level, even as a Chief Master Sergeant level, and I would offer, especially as a Chief Master Sergeant level, we still have to grow and we have to develop. And I tell people all the time, you're never too young to lead. And oh, by the way, you're never too old to grow. And we have to be in the business of growing, and we'll never be too old.
Oh, that's a great answer. And I appreciate that, because sometimes I have airmen who are looking at me and I need some of that, you know, back and forth mentorship, and they're thinking that I got all the answers, right? So it's great to hear that continues, you know, regardless of where you are on the chain of command, right?
Yeah.
So you have a huge following. I hope you know this. And a lot of us are little girls like me that dreamed of being leaders, because back in the 80s, there was no one that looked like us in these seats, right? And one day I woke up, and I'm a mom of 4, and I'm looking at your Facebook story or Facebook feed, and it's like 5 in the morning. I don't even know if we're in the same time zone, but you're up and you're about to go to the gym. And I was going to go for a run, but I was really trying to talk myself out of it. And I thought, well, if with all the things on your plate, if you can get up and go to the gym, I can get up and go run for 30 minutes. And I posted, and then you quickly responded that you were so proud of me. I was like, oh, and I can't tell you how many other people came up to me and they're like, did you see that she responded to you? I was like, no, I actually didn't see it because I was running. So, but I did.
About it.
Maria,
it was a big deal for that day.
I love that you shared that story. I don't know who, you know, sometimes I'm responding to, other than I know it's a fellow airman who's just like me, who, you know, like, you know, that's where I think it's important as leaders to sometimes show our transparency. You know, when I came in the Air Force, I don't know that I saw leaders show their transparency. I saw leaders that had like this armor up, and like they were pretty perfect, and they got up at 5 o'clock because they were so disciplined. Let me tell you, like, I am Miss Snooze Button. Like, I love to hit snooze. But what I've learned though over time is that I have to discipline myself, because when I hit snooze too much and I start to, when I'm not on my routine, I'm not able to be my best for our airmen. So thanks for sharing that story. But I share with you, I'm just like you, the struggle is real. It's just, I have a little bit more experience where I realize that, you know, if I don't do things to set myself on upright, then it's not me necessarily who pays the price, but to me, it's those whom I serve.
How do you, I don't know how you find the balance. I know I've read a couple articles that you have really just recently found that work-life balance.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious that being in this role now as a chief master sergeant, you're a mother to basically the entire Air Force, and you're a mother to your own children. How are you managing this pandemic world and the virtual learning environment? I mean, I don't imagine you have like nannies on call. It's probably your husband helping out, and then you still wanting to be active in their lives because you genuinely care about everything. How do you do it?
I will tell you that I do it one day at a time, like everybody. And again, 28 years of experience has really helped me to understand what works and what doesn't in my life. And it is one day at a time. There's some seasons where I'm like, man, like, you know, I feel like everything's amazing in the world, and the family piece is doing great. The work piece is good. I'm taking care of myself. And then you just get off kilter, and then you don't realize what has happened. And so I work very, very hard to be deliberate. Like, the one thing that we can control to some degree is how we manage the time that we have. And I got it. You know, when I was younger, when I was a tech sergeant, I don't know that I completely would agree, because I'm like, well, I can't manage this time to this time because I'm at work, right? True. But when you're not at work, and even when you are at work, you can control the time that you have while you're at work. And then when you're not, you can control that. And so I've learned to be very deliberate about the time that I do control. And that means that, yeah, sometimes I don't get as much sleep because I got to start my day and start to get my PT at 5 in the morning. And then I've got to, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning when I'm getting ready, I'm very focused on pouring into me and reading some, maybe reading a book or listening to some podcasts while I'm getting ready. And then I start my day. But the balance piece for family really is that when I end my duty day, for the most part, learning to be disciplined enough to put work away and to just spend time with your family, because that time you can never get back. And I learned that for many, many years of not making the right decision. And so I learned that, you know, if I just spend, you know, let's say 1,800 to 2,000 with my kiddos, or, you know, 1,800 to 2,100, I mean, that's not a lot of time. Like, you really only get 3 to 4, 5 hours at, you know, at max a day with your family. We spend more time with our Air Force family than we do our real family. So you've got to balance that time that you have. Well.
Oh yeah.
Hear that, Ariel?
Trust me, I understand.
It's tough. Again, I want y'all to be each other's accountability partners on this, but this is a lesson that I didn't get right until, you know, I'm still perfecting it, but I didn't get right until I was a command chief. And the only people who knew how much I struggled were my family, you know, because they saw it.
I think the pandemic has definitely allowed enough people to slow down for a moment and to reassess. And I definitely benefited, I guess, from that. Less the fact of the pandemic, but more the fact that I got to slow down, right? Because in the process, I needed some friends, right, to give me that accountability. And I couldn't put it all on Maria because she's already got her things as well. And so there's only so much we can do for each other to help support whatever we've got going on, along with their family and the work and stuff like that. So we kind of cobbled together this group of girls that are all around the same rank. We've all kind of done some of the same things. And once we all started actually communicating with each other, having, virtual happy hours, things like that, we're talking about the same things are happening in each other's families. And it gave us the opportunity to really just take a breath and say, okay, I'm not crazy. This thing happens with, the kids and the laundry and the work and the whatever. And it was definitely a breath of fresh air that I needed, that it went beyond just Marie and I, because sometimes you forget that. And so I appreciate having that opportunity to really just slow down is really what it all came down to.
I love that. So you're talking about, that social pillar when it comes to comprehensive airman fitness. And I'm a big CAF believer, because I believe that you have to be strong physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. And strong in all areas, because kind of if you're deficient somewhere, your house isn't going to be quite balanced, and have a strong foundation. And that social pillar is so important, because just like you both, I had a strong network of other leaders that I could relate to, and we could come together. And again, time is precious. So sometimes we just came together, for about 30 minutes, had a coffee, gave each other high five, and said, let's go do this. And that's all we needed, to kind of move on. But it helps you understand that you are normal, and just being able to have an outlet to be able to share those things. I love you're doing that.
Yeah. I appreciate these girls so much.
Yeah.
So I'm also a mom, got 2 kids. And one of my kids has Down syndrome, so she has special needs. And that requires a lot of time and attention outside of the normal duty day, a lot of brain power to maintain all of the things that she's got going on, right? And I work with a lot of our military members here locally who are in EFMP to kind of advocate for some of their needs here. And it just makes me think about, what type of resources that you as a mom, you kind of use for your family to be able to really just keep family life going, right?
Yeah. A lot of resources, me and I will tie it back to kind of comprehensive airman fitness. We have resources on all those sides, especially, kind of the social, the mental piece, where we have caregivers who we can reach out to for whatever it is that we need, and to include our spiritual piece. And so to help with our family piece, I also am connected with whomever my first sergeant is, to help make sure that I understand all the resources that are available. And that was me when I was younger, right? Like when I was younger, I needed my first sergeant. When I was a tech sergeant and I had kiddos, I needed my first sergeant to help share with me, hey, what are some of the programs? I feel like there's times where I'm always picking my kiddo up at 1800, and like they're the last person, what if I needed daycare beyond 1800? What are some things? And again, reaching out to all the different networks that are available and other parents in your situation to find out what is available to help us. I used that single parents night out a lot. My husband was deployed. He did 5 one-year deployments and then like an 18-month deployment. So I felt like a single parent a lot. So I used those resources that the Airmen Family Readiness Center gave. We just have to look for the resources, and we can't be too proud to ask for resources. And I think sometimes that's on us. There were times where, again, he would be deployed, and even though I have friends and family and people would say, tell us what you need, whatever you need, how many of us always even kind of, ask? A lot of times we're just too proud, or we don't want to inconvenience anybody. But I would say, people want to help.
I'm so glad that you said people want to help, because I have been in that place where I don't want to say I was ashamed to ask for help, but if I'm always the one asking for help and no one's asking me for help, that's just what it seems like. You get burnt out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm curious. Again, back to this CAF, work-life balance and support system. what do you say you would do to balance it all without getting burnt out and stay focused on the mission and stay focused on your family and like your ultimate goal?
Yeah.
What is your ultimate goal?
So I would say, Maria, you got to focus on like, what's your why? What's your purpose? Every single one of us has that. And you got to stay true to that. You know, what is your purpose? What's your why? And kind of, you know, what's your goals and end state and what you want to do. And don't let temporary circumstances or happenstance, how you happen to feel, alter you from your goals, the end state, and your why and your purpose. And that was, again, something that I've had to learn as a young NCO on up to now. Like, I've got to play the long game for my family, and I have to play the long game for my life. And so I'm not going to make decisions or get deterred from what those goals are because of how I feel or a temporary circumstance. You know, you can help control to some degree what that is. And so that's how I've remained focused on the prize. You know, I've remained focused on being able to balance my role as first and foremost as a spouse, and then, you know, as a mom, and then as an airman. And if I can take care of the first two, if I can be, you know, a good spouse and a good mom, then chances are I'm gonna be a good airman too, and a good leader. And then you could also tie it back into most importantly, like, just be a good person. So I tell people all the time, you know, if you can focus on being a good person, everything else just lines up.
And there's just, I appreciate that comment you said about don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's why we're here on the Air Force Aid Society, right? That's what they do. They help airmen. That's the podcast we're on, Airmen Helping Airmen. That's their whole purpose. And so I think it's awesome that, one, that they do that. And two, that it's so amazing that regardless of, you know, whether or not you're an airman or now a guardian, you can still use those services to be able to just get the help that you need to be able to function for whatever is going on in your life right now.
Yeah. Hey, and I don't want y'all to ever like misunderstand and be like, man, she fast has her stuff together. Like, look at her. No, this again, I'm gonna say this like 1,000 times. You know, it's been a work in progress, and I've had 28 years of experience to get myself, you know, where I need to be. And on that getting help piece, I'm serious that when you can be 100% you and be your best, then you can be the best leader and the best airman that you need to be, and the best whatever to the people who are surrounding you. I had, and I'm not too proud to share that I have a monthly meeting with the chaplain. I've had that for several years now, since I was at like Goodfellow. And I use that as a way of sometimes, you know, one, I'm like, chaplain, like Joe Bass needs prayer. Two, chaplain, I need you to pray for like all the things that, you know, I'm responsible for, and help me have the wisdom to deal with that. So I have a monthly meeting with the chaplain. And sometimes, by the way, it's just life. Sometimes I'm like, hey, chaplain, like, can you pray? Because I really kind of, you know, I'm just too through with my family right now, you know, so it's just life. So, you know, we all have to figure out what that help is for all of us and not be too proud to get it.
Thank you so much.
So whenever I hear about people who are going into like the chaplain's office, or we have something here called EAS, so Executive Assistant Services, so where you can speak with a therapist, it makes me so proud that that's kind of how our Air Force has shifted, right? Mm-hmm. So people didn't used to talk about going to get therapy. People didn't talk about, you know, getting help. It was for a while, because I've been in for 18 years. I'll hit 19 in November. And it's been amazing watching how that stigma has kind of, you know, slowly been, you know, melting away. And that if you need to go get seen and somebody says, maybe you need some help, that doesn't feel like an attack anymore. That doesn't feel like an attack on your character, right? It doesn't feel like an attack on, you know, your performance or anything like that. Recently had a conversation with a girlfriend because there was just, between all the different work hats that I was wearing, I just called her up and she was like, do you need to talk to someone? other than me? It's like, because I will gladly help you, but would you like to talk to someone else? Because I can help you out with it. And I was like, I've already got someone on deck that I'll be talking to, but I appreciate that you are asking me that question and you feel confident and comfortable enough to ask me that question. Is there any kind of additional advice that you would give to other women when it comes to, when you're starting to feel that burnout? Who should you communicate with, or what should you do for yourself to be able to kind of pull yourself away from that edge?
I think you just have to, first and foremost, just be honest with yourself and have the mindset of it's okay to, seek out help. And then, what that help is or who that help is, you probably know best if you need to go see a chaplain or a mental health provider or MFLAC or whatever any of the helping agencies are. Maybe you just need to talk to your first surgeon, or maybe you need to talk to a wingman. You have to have the mindset of it is okay for me to do that. And I have to identify that I actually do need the help and then just go do it.
I agree with that. It's really good when you have a command team that appreciates it. And then it will also give you the space for it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the motivating factor for me, is that having the ability to go without any repercussions has been probably the easiest reason for me to just be like, okay, I need to take this day.
Ariel, let me transition a little bit on kind of our thoughts from an Air Force perspective. As sitting in my seat, what I feel like we have a responsibility to do as an Air Force is, one, make sure that helping agencies are available to all airmen. Two, provide tools for every single one of our airmen to be able to be the best wingmen and the best supervisors that they need to be, because a lot of times when our airmen, need something, it isn't necessarily always something that sends you to mental health or whatever. When I talk to a lot of airmen in the field and I ask airmen, hey, what is it that you expect from your leadership? What's interesting is the number one answer I get back is to just know they care. That's powerful. And so I share that with every level of leadership that I'm talking to, whether it's wing commanders down to first line supervisors. Our airmen, capital A airmen, to include me, I just want to know that my boss cares. And I want to know that the teammates that I'm around, we can't just have buzzwords that, hey, we're part of Air Force family and we're brothers and sisters in this, but we don't care, And so that gets after the culture piece that I'm always talking about. And if you look at my three focus areas, people, readiness, culture is foundational to who we are as airmen. And we have to have a culture where people care, where our airmen feel valued, every single one of us, where we work in environments and we live in environments where we can thrive and be our very best. So that's what I feel like we owe as an enterprise, is that culture where every airman can be their very best.
I think that we are getting closer to that culture with all of the diversity and inclusion. I call this huge wins. What other wins do you think we have?
We got a lot of wins coming, Maria, a lot. We are very focused on what does our Air Force need to look like in 2030, 2035 and beyond, and how do we make sure that the Air Force today is going to continue to develop airmen that we need for to be the Air Force that our nation needs in future years to come. And so we're at an inflection point. You saw my boss push out his 8-page strategic approach on accelerate, change, or lose. And a lot of our airmen are like, accelerate, change, why? And I share that why. We're at an inflection point where we have to make some decisions based on where we are as a service, based on the global landscape and what some of our adversaries across the globe are trying to do in creating a contested environment. We have to make those decisions. So based on that, everything that comes across my desk and everything that we are focused on is building that Air Force for 2030 and beyond. And so the wins that we'll have is we're looking at everything from how we bring airmen into our Air Force, how we develop, train them, and retain our best talent. And then also how, when our airmen take off this uniform, how they can be, the most productive citizen when they go back into their hometown. There's nothing we're not looking at when it comes to talent management. There's every single thing revolves around, like talented airmen. How do we grow them? How do we develop them? How can we have an assignment policy that supports that? How can we have promotion and evaluation policies that support keeping our talented airmen in? How can we have developmental opportunities that help our airmen be their best? How can we make sure that we kill some of the unneeded bureaucracy so that our airmen truly can be creative and get after the challenges that are impacting our Air Force today? We got a lot of wins coming. We have a lot of small wins. You'll see some small wins on like dress and appearance, uniform type stuff, to major wins when it comes to how we change evaluations, promotions, and then of course, strategic level changes on how do we design our Air Force to be most effective for that future high-end fight.
It is crazy that when I joined, I always thought that I would be done when I had a child, because the stigma, I don't want to say the stigma, but everyone thought you get pregnant as a female, you have the baby, and then that's your way out. That's why you did it. But I continue to have children, now 4, and it's changed so much from I'd have to go back after 6 weeks, or you're going to give me a couple extra weeks. I had a tough pregnancy, I had a tough birth, give me another month. And now these airmen have up to 3-4 months, maybe 6 months if we got some leave banked up. And it's just amazing to know that because someone cares about them, that they want to give back. They care that much more.
Yeah.
And I think you're helping build this force that is, again, to be reckoned with. We're already like the world's greatest Air Force. I didn't think we could get any better, but here we are.
Yeah. We've got to keep getting better. And I'll be honest, we have some great teammates across the force with some great ideas on how do we just get after changing the way we look at policies and processes. What worked for us when we came in isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. And that's, again, how I want all of us to look at things. The way we do fitness today, is it what it needs to look like in 10 years from now? Probably not. The way we assess people today, is that the way it needs to look in 10 years from now? I'm certain that that's not the case. And so, we've got talented people across our commands, in squadrons. We have to allow space for them to help us get after what our Air Force needs to look like.
So I'm going to change our course of questioning a little bit here. So since we are kind of talking about Women's History Month and things like that, I just kind of want to zone in a little bit more on you, and specifically as a female growing up through the ranks and really commanding teams along the way. Have you found it difficult in any way with your advancement in comparison to maybe any of your predecessors that may have been male ahead of you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't lie and say that I don't feel like I've at times had to work harder. But I've never let that deter me. It just, I worked, as hard as I could, and never allow any circumstances that I can't control deter me from being able to be my best. Did it stink at times? Of course it does, but again, you just persevere and you push through. And then when you are in a position, you become better so that you make sure that others around you don't have to go through that plight.
Yeah, some of the individuals that have come before me were really good about that last point that you made when it comes to just setting up some key people behind them so that when we're looked at, our packages are looked at and those positions become available, we are seen as a more viable candidate. And that's probably the reason why I got some of the jobs that I've received so far, because of the fact that I've had those individuals in my past who've kind of set me up for success. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Yes. Ariel, I remember a story now thinking about it when I was in Airman First Class. And I remember at the time our squadron chief came down to visit, and, you know, I was frustrated, and I remember kind of venting, and I shared with this chief, which is interesting because back then airmen didn't talk to chiefs, but he must have been so personable, but that I felt comfortable enough to just ask for some mentorship. But I remember sharing with him some frustration that I felt like I did have to work harder than some of my coworkers in my immediate section. And what he shared with me, that's when I started learning the principle of control what you can control and don't worry about the rest. He's like, you know, focus on what you have to do, because if you're worried about other people around you, you're never going to make it very far. And don't let them deter you. And I'll never forget that advice that I got from him as a young A1C.
So would you say that that person was a mentor? Who exactly are your mentors? I'm so curious to know how you got molded to be this person.
All right. So, you know, when I think about mentorship, people were mentoring me throughout my career. And sometimes I don't know that I even knew it. Like that Chief Master Sergeant, you know, when I was at the 74th Fighter Squadron, who came down, I don't even remember having a ton of discussion with him, honestly, throughout my time at that squadron, except for I remember that one touch point, really. And so he mentored me at that point, but I wouldn't call him like like we've made mentorship a little bit awkward for people, right? Because we've deemed people as, you know, this is my mentor. And then the first time that person does something you don't like or says something you don't like, you like disconnect the mentorship and they're no longer my mentor anymore. So I tell people all the time, I'm like, you know, I don't want to be anybody's mentor. If I happen to be, that's great. But that's a lot of responsibility when sometimes people don't appreciate, you know, the complete honest feedback. And so all that to say, I have had so many mentors, and they don't even know that they were a mentor to me, because I saw great things that they did or inspiring things that they did. And I took this piece from this person and then another piece from another person. Or sometimes I knew that this particular person was somebody that I could call and ask about this because they've walked, you know, they've walked that walk, and they understand where I'm coming from. And so I've had too many mentors that I can count. I would offer that probably every single supervisor I have had to some degree has been a mentor to me in teaching me and growing me. Even the supervisors sometimes who we might say were not that great, you learned a lot from them too. And so you know, I've had too many mentors that I can count, and I've had a lot of strong peers. So one thing that I will say that I've done in my career is surround myself by other strong people, and never felt intimidated by that. Like as a tech sergeant, I like to surround myself by other tech sergeants, other NCOICs from different shops who are strong in their own right, because I feel like that healthy competition is good, and iron sharpens iron. And if I can learn something from other strong peers, that's the way to go. And so throughout the ranks, especially as a chief, I've surrounded myself by strong chiefs that are strong in their own right. And it doesn't ever intimidate me. In fact, I want those around me, and I want my team to always be strong.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot, but also pretty cool. The fact that you can build up all your team around you, because between K right before you and then now you in the seat, whoever's coming after both of you, they're gonna have some big shoes to fill.
Well, they'll have their own shoes, right? And that's what people were like. So here's what's interesting. A year ago, Ariel, I remember saying that, and somebody brought that to memory. They were like, hey, who do you think's going to take SimSAF number 18 spot? And I was like, I don't know, but they got some big shoes to fill. And they reminded me that I said that. And so fast forward, now I'm in the position, but the thing is, I can never fill Chief Master in the Air Force number 18's shoes. You know, those were his shoes for him to walk in at that time and lead at that particular time. Fast forward to today, the Air Force we're serving in today requires some different shoes. And they are led right now by our Chief of Staff, General Brown, and he understands the global landscape and the challenges that the Air Force today is experiencing. And I've got my own shoes that I'm gonna walk in, and then whoever comes to replace me, it's going to be a different landscape, and it's going to be amazing. And then in 2 or 3 iterations, it could be either one of you two as the next Chief Master in the Air Force. Who knows? I get excited when I talk with our airmen, especially when I am talking to large groups of airmen, because I'm like, man, somewhere in this group is Chief Master in the Air Force number 20, 21, 22, 23. Yeah. Somewhere.
All right. So I'm gonna throw in this last 2-part question. So I am nearing my 20 mark, right? The first part of this question is I'm at 18 years. I'm nearing the end. There's still more to give, but I don't know if I have it because of the family, right? When you got to that point, because I know you just recently celebrated 28, how did you navigate that? And then second part, what's next after the Air Force for you?
All right. How I navigated it, I took one assignment at a time. That is honestly it. I'm a big bloom where you're planted type of person, where you get into your assignment, you make your organization better than it was. You do your best to impact your teammates around you, and you take one assignment at a time. And you balance that with, again, what's good for your family, what's good for the Air Force. And that's how I have operated. And I remember actually being at the 14-year mark. And I remember telling my husband, again, our Army soldier at the time, I'm like, hey, babe, like 6 more years and like, I'm going to be out and we're going to live our best life. And then somehow you get to the 20-year mark, and you're still in that, hey, one assignment at a time. And we're like, man, at the 20-year mark, we were really enjoying life and living our best life, and in a happy place when it came to our family, and able to do great things in our Air Force. So we continue to stay in, and that was us. As far as what I'm going to do when I retire, I don't know. My friends laugh at me because I tell them I'm not going to do anything, but they're like, no, that's not you. So I'm sure I will probably go hang out on an island somewhere for about a month or 2. And my kiddos will both be out of the house at that time, and we will enjoy life and then figure out what we want to do at some point.
Island life.
Yeah.
Oh, the island life. How we miss it.
We had the opportunity to be stationed out in Hawaii together, and man, did we love it.
I know. And here's what else I'm going to be doing. Cheering on the United States Air Force, and excited for, what it's going to do. And that'll be the one thing that I'm doing, is from the background, cheering our airmen on, and excited to see where it's going to continue to go.
And we just finished up the Women's Symposium last week. After all of that feedback, what advice do you have for women, or like, let's say my daughter right now who has no idea what she's going to do with her future? What advice do you have for women airmen, their children?
My advice to all women is, don't be the reason why you don't become who you're supposed to become. Meaning, don't let your own self-limiting beliefs keep you from being your very best. And that was a lesson I had to learn, because people are always like, hey, what's your glass ceiling? And like, they want to hear something really juicy. Like, what was the reason why you felt like you couldn't do the things you could? And I always tell them, my glass ceiling that I had to overcome was me. Like, so when I learned to overcome self-limiting beliefs, that is when the goodness happens. So, and that gets back to my first thing that I talked about with General Van Ovos, when she said, you can't be what you can't see. And so when I was a young airman, a young staff sergeant, I rarely saw female chiefs. Just didn't see them. So you couldn't really be that, because you didn't know. And all you saw was strong male chiefs, or I saw strong leaders like my husband. And I can't be my husband, but man, he's such a strong, dominant leader. And that's what I started to kind of associate leadership skills with. And I can't measure up to that. So that's why I had to learn I can't measure up to that or this or whatever my own self-limiting beliefs are, but I can measure up to being the best me that I need to be. And so I tell every woman, do not be the reason why you are not your best.
I needed that advice maybe 18 years ago.
That's okay. You're getting it now so that you can go do great things. And the other thing I tell people too is your identity is not in the stripes that are on your sleeve, like period. So you be who you need to be for your family, for your teammates around you, and most of all for you.
Thank you.
So when it comes to some of that teammanship, that wingmanship, the Air Force Aid Society is supposed to be here for us to do that, and I think that they do on a pretty much daily basis. Why do you think the Air Force Aid Society is so important to our airmen and to our guardians when it comes to supporting them?
Yeah, I mean, our Air Force does a good job of taking care of our airmen and their families, but we always need the help of other agencies and organizations to help us do that as well. And, you know, and Air Force Aid Society is that organization where they're able to do things like fundraise, to be able to get money, and which then ultimately provides resources for our airmen and families. And we appreciate it. We need their support, and they're always there when we need them.
Couldn't agree more. I think between Maria's ability to use their technology fund recently, and then my support to some airmen to make sure that they can get to, you know, family in need because they didn't quite have the money in pocket. The Air Force Aid Society is probably one of the most fundamental things that we have within the Air Force when it comes to resources, especially some of that emergency style kind of resource. Thank you, Chief Bess, for entertaining me, for entertaining us on this podcast, and giving me the opportunity to just, you know, sit down and chat with you for a little while.
Absolutely. Ariel, Maria, it was wonderful meeting you both. I love an opportunity to just break away from my somewhat hectic schedule at times, to be able to just have fun and talk to fellow airmen, so that we can help sharpen each other, right? And part of me talking with our airmen is also being able to hear the things that are, you know, on your minds. It helps me be a better leader. So thanks for spending some time with me today. Thanks for spending some time highlighting Women's History Month. It is important that we do that, because we will be a better Air Force and a better military when we quit having firsts, seconds, and thirds, but we just value the diversity that we have within our force. And we do have some amazing airmen that are very diverse. We've got to make sure that we continue to embrace that, and that we are inclusive, and that, you know, we create an environment where every single one of our airmen can thrive. I'm very appreciative for the Air Force Aid Society for everything that they do to be able to support our airmen, to support our families. We are able to be our very best because of partnerships and everything that AFAS does for us. So thanks for having me on, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future.
Thank you so much, Chief Bess. This message was so much needed myself, and I'm sure the audience once they hear it.
Good. Well, I can't wait to see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you. Join us for our next season, where you will hear from our airmen, guardians, and of course our supporting partners who help ensure that we're here when you need us.